How's everyone doing? Oh, we can do better than that. How's everyone doing? Okay, we'll pick up the energy. It's good. So the topic today is youth in politics. And I want to dissect that for a second. So politics. Let's define what politics is all about. No, it's not just about the campaign signs we put out every election cycle. It's not just about the back and forth that you see in the news media about what political candidate is saying and not saying today. It's a lot, to me, more broad. To me, it affects our everyday life. And I like to think about it this way. What is not impacted by politics? Even the bed you sleep on, there's a regulation attached to it. Remember that little tag that says, do not remove? I know you removed it. The time of day that you're actually going to bed, daylight savings time. Again, there was a regulation behind that. So almost every aspect of your life is impacted by politics and in government in some form or fashion. Some might find that scary, some might find that interesting, but to me it comes down to and boils down to politics is about people. Politics is about our everyday life. It's about making today a little bit better than yesterday. It's about making tomorrow a little better than today. And so youth in politics, let's take the youth aspect. Some of you might have noticed when I come up on the stage, who is this spiky-haired kid going to talk to me about politics? There is a perception that young people can't have a voice at the table. And I've seen this throughout my entire life. And it's almost like this preconceived notion that young people, whether they've reached a certain age or not, they sort of have to wait their turn, that they're inexperienced. And there's a lot of sort of terms and phraseology that we use when we describe millennials. I've heard phrases, millennials are lazy, they're not involved, they don't care, they're self-centered, they just visit Starbucks all day, so on and so forth. I mean, who doesn't love Starbucks? But seriously. So there's a lot of words to describe millennials. So I like to flip that on its head. I like to challenge that idea as much as we can, because the sheer notion that you showed up here today, some of you are millennials in the crowd, is a proven testament that you're at least interested in going beyond yourself. So it's not just everybody fits those stereotypes. And so I like to challenge that as much as possible. And so there's a time in everyone's life that really you have an aha moment. I like to call it an aha Oprah moment. Can everybody say aha? Ready? There we go, engagement, I love it. All right, so this is great. So the aha Oprah moment is where you really kind of discover yourself. You find your voice. You find what you're most passionate about in life. Some people, it takes them their whole life to get to that moment. And some people wake up and like, boom, I know it. It's great. And so my aha moment really came in high school. And I was hosting a public affairs TV show, because we had that luckily at our high school. And I loved asking questions. And this is sort of a reoccurring theme today about answers. And I loved asking questions because, again, when you had people that were political leaders, newsmakers coming on the show, they would be kind of put off by, this kind of spiky-haired high school student asking them tough questions about their policy, about their positions, about what they've said and what they haven't said. And so it's super awesome to kind of get them off kilter a little bit. And so I love that. I really yearn for that kind of meet the press style interview. So get this. So I was interviewing this. I'm just so excited about this. I was interviewing the state house candidate, and the interview went great, but when the cameras died down and the lights dimmed, because it was like Florida in your face, it's just like this light, it's like bam, but when everything sort of died down a little bit, we were still in sort of a heated conversation. We were clearly not seeing eye to eye about some random controversial topic, probably healthcare reform, but it was something where we were not seeing eye to eye on it. And so I was thinking to myself, we're just going to agree to disagree, and that's okay in politics to do that in a very civil way. But she said something that has always stuck by me and really changed the course of my life at that point. Because at that point, I really wanted to be a broadcast journalist. I really wanted to be somebody on the outside holding leadership, holding government accountable. And she asked me a question. She said, Justin, how old are you? And at the time, I was 17, so I said 17. And she said something very profound. She said, well, you're not 18 yet. You can't vote. So your opinion does not matter. Mic drop, right? Oh my goodness, right? So I was not mad at her, but more about this consistent strain in our society where it's this weird pressure that they put on young people where they almost immediately label as apathetic, not interested in politics, but in the same vein, if somebody's actually interested, they'll say, well, you're inexperienced. And this dynamic pressure that is put on students, to me, I was more frustrated at the system. I was more frustrated at an environment where this pressure is unnecessary. Why is this actually happening? And so that really set me off on wanting to stand up and be a voice for those who didn't have a voice. Stand up for our generation, my generation. And that's really important because, again, up to that point, I really wanted to be a journalist. And so I took necessary steps to say, okay, let's do something about it. Let's not just complain about it. Let's not just get angry, because I was angry. I said, I'm going to do something about it. So I became the first student appointed by the governor to the Maine State Board of Education. So I was a high school student on the State Board of Education dealing with education policy and school construction project, all the fun stuff. It's great. And I thought that this was the opportunity. This was my chance to really make some in-ground on this issue, to have students represented on the board, actually to delve into the important issues and do something and feel good about that. What I came away with from that experience was very discouraged in government. While yes, they put students on the State Board of Education, it ultimately was a photo op at the time. And while I wanted to really push the envelope and say, let's tackle issues, let's tackle the fact that we need a civics education requirement in our schools because young people don't have a firm understanding of how their government works, but gosh darn it, we're going to know how those chairs swivel on the voice, right? And so I really was passionate about that. I thought that was something we should bring up and talk about. Drug prevention, now we all are talking about it, but back then it was sort of like, oh, well, we don't need to talk about drug prevention. Gosh, if we only did, you know? And so some of those issues I really cared about. Standardized testing, another thing. It's like we're so caught up in the standardized filling in the bubbles. It's like I'm more than a test score, thank you very much. And so I really believed in some of those core concepts. The reality was my voice was stifled. And in doing so, it stifled young people's voice. And so there was a ongoing situation with the board where they really didn't want me there. And they formed a nice convenient committee to voice my concerns, which is a convenient way in government of kind of sliding me off to the side. And so it was ended up being a very rocky relationship. And I came away from that service, yes, I was appreciative of the opportunity, but again, very discouraged with the system and government not really listening, right? We're talking a lot about listening today. That wasn't happening. And so it really encouraged me to go really more into journalism. Again, I wanted to say, okay, forget that. I'm not going to go on the inside. I'm going to be on the outside asking those tough questions. And so I went to college, much like a lot of you are doing, and found my passion in journalism, in broadcast journalism in particular. So I went to college for it. And as the years went by, I got increasingly frustrated. That same fervor that I had going into the Board of Education position and coming out very frustrated, it just kind of built up. And eventually I got to a point of trying to have like one of those, another aha moment. Let's say aha, aha, right. So you look in the mirror and you're like, oh my goodness. It was really one of those situations where, and I know this sounds weird, but it was really just, I woke up one day and it really hit me that how am I going to be a journalist in the real world when I am still so frustrated, like just almost irate about it, like physically upset about really not hearing our voices, not having a seat at the table and doing something, take those actionable steps. Because as a journalist, you're supposed to tell other people's stories, which I loved. Everybody has a very interesting story. I bet in this room we could tell a lot of stories. That's great. But ultimately, you're really told not to then get involved. So if you report on a really good story, let's talk about water in Africa or a lot of the other issues we've talked about here today, you can't really take that next step if it's somehow connected to government or politics. And so I felt like my voice would have been stifled if I continued that path. Still love it, still would love to go back into it at some point, but it was one of those things where I wouldn't feel fulfilled at the end of the day if I knew I didn't try in every ounce of my being to try to make an impact and make a difference. So I went back to, much like I did with the State Board, I should have learned my lesson at the State Board of Education, but I went back to it, I said, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to stand up. And so I was 20 years old at the time. I was going to college in Vermont. and I decided to run for an open state representative seat in Maine, in my hometown of Saco. So, oh, this is super fun. So I'm 20 years old, a lot more slender than I was now, but it was great. But I was going to college during the week in Vermont and coming back to campaign every weekend. And I had a primary and a general election, so it was 2 elections to deal with. Super fun. And that experience was really interesting. It was a number of different things. Number one, you had to flip a switch between being a college student, which has its own set of challenges, and then being the leader I was seeking to be when I was coming back home. And being a 20-year-old college student running for public office has, again, its set of challenges. There's always going to be people that slam the door and like, oh my goodness, Justin, you're too young, you can't make a difference. Come back to me in 20 years when you have some life experience. And that was consistently the argument that my opponents would use repeatedly. You know, Justin's too young, he's a college kid, what does he know? How could he possibly represent me? And I love when that happens, because that always happens in my life, and it's probably happened to you on some level. It doesn't have to be politics, it can be anything, where there are those doubters out there. You know, that people that put you down, and then you just play that Taylor Swift song, Shake It Off, Shake It Off, Shake It Off. I know you want to dance to it, it's a thing. We should make this a dance stage. But, and so I really wanted to, again, prove those people wrong, not because I want to get back, but it was because I felt like I had some ownership over our generation almost. Like I really wanted to say, you know what? Why can't we represent people? Why can't we be the voice for the voiceless? Why can't we make an impact on how our government works? Because to be honest with you, why wait around 10 or 30 years to be told, oh, sorry, by the way, it's too late to actually do anything about the challenges that we face. You can impact maybe your great-grandchildren's generation. Oh, well, great. Well, what about your life? Right? We have one life, and somebody, I think in that previous video, we had something about all the dots on the board for each week of your life up to 90 years old. That's a pretty profound thing when you look at it from that perspective. We have such a short amount of time. So, I ran for office, and there was a lot of things that happened in that race. People spray-painted derogatory words on my campaign sign. I had to involve police. It was a reoccurring thing because of my personal traits. So I ran as an openly gay candidate, primarily because I'm just an open and honest person. I think authenticity is so important in politics. And we have so few of that now that it's like, oh my gosh, people, just be real. And so when asked the question, of course, I would answer like who I love, all that jazz. And ironically, we had marriage equality on the ballot. It was 2012. And so some people responded well, some people didn't. But I really wanted to focus on the issues. I really wanted to focus on the things that mattered in people's lives and around their dinner table. So I made my campaign about those issues. And when asked about marriage equality, basically I want to get married sometime, which luckily I am now. So it's one of those situations where there are always going to be those people that say, I don't want to do that. You're a little different. I'm not going to vote for you. And so I took a different approach to tackle that. Instead of saying, you know, I'm going to highlight this homophobia, I'm going to, you know, bring it up in the newspapers, like a lot of people had suggested to me, a lot of activists, a lot of friends of mine, you know, a lot of people that in the know were like, you got to talk about this, you got to make this an issue. I said, you know what? No, I don't want to give those people power. I don't want to highlight their actions and give them the attention that they're craving. And so I said, instead, we're going to win at the ballot box and show our community is better than that. And that's exactly what we did. And we won with 60% of the vote. And we had a 1,000-point difference. And to me, that was not just about that particular issue, but about how young people can not only run, but they can win. And that is something that is such a profound thing, because so often we have so few young people actually run. And when they do, they're demonized for doing so. And again, it gets to that dynamic difference. And it's not just about running and winning. It's about then serving in government. We've actually been able to make a huge impact. There's about 13 of us at the Maine State House that are under the age of 30 on both sides of the aisle. And the first thing that we did when we started to serve is we got together. We said, we want to set an example for the rest of the legislature. We want to set an example for the people that have been here 20 or 30 years and can't get along. We actually formed the legislature's bipartisan youth caucus. Again, 13 of us that may not agree on every issue, but when we're in those meetings, the number one thing that we talk about is what can we agree on first? Let's get that done, and then we can disagree on everything else. Because when you start to build that kind of relationship, when you build that goodwill with somebody you may ultimately disagree with, you can go into then a debate knowing that that person is a human being at the end of the day, not a D or an R after their name. And so when young people can prove that time and time again, and not just meet, we've actually passed good legislation through. We have passed an expansion of the Opportunity Maine tax credit, which if you don't know what that is, especially for those who are in college, look it up. It is awesome. Okay? It helps to alleviate some of the student loan debt problems that we have. A lot more needs to get done. Some of the other things that we're able to do as a youth caucus, we passed my bill that made community service a high school graduation standard, which is a really important aspect about service and service learning, which, oh, love it! It's fantastic, because then you feel really a part of something bigger than yourself. And something that I'm most proud of is passing comprehensive campaign finance and PAC reform. And as a young person, it may not seem like that's the big issue, but when I see money in politics being really the cancer that's eroding away our democratic process, it is scary. And you might think it just happens at DC, but it is a horrible issue in Augusta. We have legislators that literally are taking money from the very industries we're supposed to be regulating through their quote-unquote PACs, or political action committees. And so we were able to pass that, come together and actually agree, yes, this is a problem, and yes, we're going to do something about it with a bill. And it became law. And so I reference those things because those are success stories. It shows that not only young people can run for office, they can win, and they can be effective servants of the public. And I hope each and every one of you thinks about your life in a very similar way, not just about politics. This is about life. Because remember, going back to what we originally talked about, politics is about people. Politics is about our everyday life. And in life, you are the driver in the ongoing journey of self-discovery, meaning nobody can take responsibility for your life besides you. If I chose not to step up to the plate, if I chose not to get involved, then who would? And that's the question sometimes you have to ask yourself. If not you, then who? Because if you don't step up to the plate, it won't get done. And if you don't have that mentality, we're going to be waiting a long time for fixing some of the problems that we face as a state, as a nation, and as a world. And that's, to me, a big burden, but at the same time, it's very exciting. Because there are other people that think just like that. And if we get together, like everybody here in this room, the possibilities are endless. You can reach your greatest potential by working collaboratively together to make it happen and finding your inner voice and inner passions, like I did mine. And I hope to see everyone's name on the ballot or serving your community in some capacity, volunteering at the soup kitchen. Those things are equally as important. It is not about the title of the person that makes the difference. It's what you do in your day-to-day life. Opening the door for somebody at the post office. Those little things have a huge ripple effect. And I hope that we can send that positive light into our world because we desperately need it. Thank you so much.